Have you ever wondered what happens in heaven when a husband and wife pray together? Not in some grand ceremony, but alone, in their bedroom, just the two of them and God. Does heaven notice? Does it move differently than when they pray alone? Saint Teresa of Ávila saw the answer. She saw it once during prayer, and the vision shook her so deeply that she wrote about it with trembling hands. This is not about theology. This is about what she witnessed with her own eyes when God pulled back the veil and showed her the invisible machinery of grace. Throughout her life, Teresa saw many things most people never see. She saw devils. She saw angels. She saw souls in purgatory and souls being dragged into hell. But among all those visions, this one stood apart because it revealed something so simple that most married couples walk past it every single day without understanding its power. If you value documented Catholic history like this, subscribe. It is the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you are hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the complete works of Saint Teresa of Ávila, translated by Kieran Kavanagh and Otilio Rodriguez, published by the Institute of Carmelite Studies, and The Interior Castle, written in 1577, at the command of her confessor, Father Jerome Gratian. Now back to the information. The vision came in 1576. Teresa was 59 years old. She had already founded 15 Reformed Carmelite monasteries across Spain. Her body was worn down by years of illness, travel on dirt roads and wooden carts, and the relentless work of building a movement that the church itself had tried to shut down more than once. But her spiritual sight had never been clearer. She was in prayer one evening in the small chapel of the monastery at Seville. The room was silent except for the faint sound of her breathing. She had been asking God to show her how married people could grow closer to Him while living in the world surrounded by children, debts, work, and all the noise that pulls hearts away from silence. Then the vision opened. She saw a married couple. She did not name them. She never identified who they were or where they lived, but she saw them clearly, kneeling together in their bedroom at night after their children had gone to sleep. The husband and wife were praying the Our Father together, that is all. They were not saying the rosary. They were not reading scripture aloud. They were simply praying the Our Father one time, together, in the presence of God. And Teresa saw what happened in heaven at that exact moment. She saw an angel descend, not metaphorically. She saw a real angel, brilliant and swift, moving from the throne of God down to that bedroom. The angel carried something in his hands. It looked like a cord of light, woven from two strands, gold and silver. Teresa watched as the angel wrapped that cord around the couple. It circled their shoulders, their hearts, their hands folded in prayer. And when the prayer ended, the cord did not disappear. It remained, glowing faintly, binding them together not just as husband and wife, but as a single unit of grace before God. Then, Teresa saw something even more startling. She saw that the cord extended upward, beyond the ceiling of the room, beyond the night sky, all the way to the throne of God. And at the other end, she saw the Father holding the cord in his hands, as if he were holding the reins of a team of horses, guiding them together, pulling them closer to himself. She understood instantly. When a husband and wife pray together, they do not simply add their prayers side by side. They become one voice, and that voice carries a weight in heaven that a single voice does not carry. Teresa wrote about this vision in her journal, but she did not publish it widely during her lifetime. It appeared later in a collection of her private writings, compiled after her death in 1582. The manuscript was preserved in the Carmelite archives in Ávila and was finally included in the critical edition of her complete works in the 20th century. But the vision did not stay buried. Word of it spread quietly among married couples in Spain, especially in the Reformed Carmelite circles where Teresa's influence was strongest. By the 1600s, spiritual directors were recommending that married couples pray the Our Father together every night before bed, citing Teresa's testimony as proof that the practice carried extraordinary grace. One of those directors was a Jesuit priest named Alonso Rodriguez, who worked in Seville in the early 1600s. He kept detailed records of his spiritual direction sessions, and in those records, he mentions at least 12 married couples who came to him asking about Teresa's vision. One case stands out. A couple came to him in 1612. They had been married for 8 years. They had 4 children. The husband worked as a merchant in the wool trade. The wife managed the household. They were devout Catholics, attended Mass regularly, prayed privately, and raised their children in the faith. But their marriage was cold. They argued constantly. They slept in the same bed but barely spoke. The husband felt disrespected. The wife felt ignored. They had come to Father Rodriguez because they were considering separation, which at that time meant living apart for the rest of their lives since divorce was not permitted. Father Rodriguez listened to them for over an hour. Then he told them about Teresa's vision. He explained what she had seen when a husband and wife prayed together. He did not give them a long spiritual program. He did not tell them to go on a pilgrimage or fast for 40 days. He told them to kneel together in their bedroom every night and pray the Our Father once. Just once, out loud, together. They agreed to try it. The first night was awkward. They knelt side by side, not touching, and stumbled through the prayer. The husband prayed too fast. The wife prayed too quietly. They barely looked at each other. But they kept going, night after night, week after week. After 3 months, something began to change. The arguments did not stop immediately, but they became less sharp. The husband noticed that when his wife prayed, her voice softened. The wife noticed that her husband's voice, usually so harsh during the day, became gentle when he said the words, "Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us." After 6 months, they came back to Father Rodriguez. They told him that the prayer had saved their marriage. Not because it fixed all their problems, but because it forced them to stand together before God every single night. It reminded them that they were not enemies. They were partners, bound by a cord they could not see but could feel. Father Rodriguez recorded this testimony in his journal. The journal was preserved in the Jesuit archives in Seville and was later digitized by the University of Navarra in 2008. The entry is dated October 23, 1612. Teresa's vision spread further. By the 1700s, it had reached France. A French Carmelite nun named Mother Marie of the Incarnation, who lived in Paris, wrote a small devotional booklet in 1734 called The Power of United Prayer. In it, she retold Teresa's vision and added testimonies from married couples in France who had experienced similar graces. One testimony came from a couple in Lyon. The husband was a baker, the wife was a seamstress. They had been married for 12 years and had no children, which at that time carried a deep social stigma. The wife had become depressed, the husband had grown distant. They were living parallel lives under the same roof. A Carmelite priest visiting Lyon in 1731 told them about Teresa's vision. They began praying the Our Father together every night. Within a year, the wife became pregnant. They had a son in 1732. The couple attributed the pregnancy to the grace of united prayer. Mother Marie recorded this testimony and had it printed in Paris. The booklet sold over 3,000 copies in its first year. Copies made their way to Spain, Italy, and eventually to the Americas. But Teresa's vision was not just about external blessings like healed marriages or answered prayers for children. It was about something deeper. She saw that when a husband and wife pray together, they create a space where God can work in ways he cannot work when they are apart. She explained it this way in her private writings. When two people stand before God in unity, their wills become one. And when their wills become one, God can pour his grace into them as if they were a single vessel. But when they pray separately, even if they pray at the same time in different rooms, their wills remain divided. The grace still comes, but it flows into two separate vessels, and the power is not the same. This is not just poetry. Teresa was describing what she saw happening in the spiritual realm. She saw that the cord the angel placed around the couple was not just a symbol. It was a real connection, a channel through which grace flowed more powerfully because two hearts were beating in unison. She wrote, "When a man and a woman pray together as husband and wife, they pray not as two, but as one flesh. And God hears them as he hears the voice of his own Son, because Christ himself is present in that unity." That sentence appeared in a letter she wrote to a married woman in Toledo in 1578. The letter was preserved in the Carmelite archives and was published in the 1860s as part of a collection of Teresa's correspondence. But Teresa also saw the danger. She saw what happened when a husband and wife stopped praying together. The cord did not break instantly. It dimmed, it frayed. And if they continued to neglect united prayer, the cord eventually fell away. And they were left standing before God as two individuals again, no longer bound by that invisible strength. She saw this happen to a couple in Ávila. She did not name them, but she wrote about them in her journal in 1579. The husband had been a devout man, a leader in the local parish. The wife had been equally devout. They had prayed together for years, but then the husband became involved in a business dispute that consumed his attention. He stopped praying with his wife. He told her he was too tired at night, too stressed, too busy. At first, the wife prayed alone, but after a few months, she also stopped. Their prayer life collapsed. Within a year, their marriage followed. The husband became bitter. The wife became resentful. They separated in 1580, and the husband died 2 years later without reconciling with her. Teresa wrote, "I saw the cord fall away from them, and I wept because I knew what they had lost. They did not lose God's love, for God never stops loving his children. But they lost the power of that united voice, and without it, they could not withstand the attacks of the enemy." The enemy. Teresa always spoke plainly about the devil. She believed that Satan hated nothing more than a husband and wife who prayed together because their united prayer struck at the heart of his strategy, which was to divide and isolate. She wrote, "The devil knows that a man alone is weak and a woman alone is weak, but a man and a woman together, united in prayer, are a fortress he cannot breach. So he works day and night to keep them apart, to fill their minds with distractions, to convince them that they are too tired, too angry, too busy to kneel together before God." She saw this strategy play out in vision after vision. She saw devils whispering in the ears of husbands and wives, telling them that prayer could wait until tomorrow, that they had already prayed alone, so there was no need to pray together, that it was awkward, that it felt forced, that it did not matter. And she saw couples believe those lies. In one vision, she saw a husband and wife lying in bed, both of them wanting to pray together, but neither one willing to suggest it, because they were afraid the other would refuse. The devil stood between them, invisible, feeding them fear and pride. They fell asleep without praying. The cord that had connected them to God dimmed just a little more. Teresa was furious when she saw that. She wrote, "Do not wait for your spouse to suggest prayer. Suggest it yourself. Even if they refuse, you have done your part. But if both of you wait, the devil wins." That advice spread through Spain in the late 1500s. Priests began telling married couples to take the initiative. If your spouse will not pray with you, ask again tomorrow. If they still refuse, pray for them, but do not give up on united prayer. One priest in Salamanca, Father Diego de Yepes, who later became Teresa's confessor and biographer, kept records of his advice to married couples. In his notes from 1584, he wrote, "I have told over 30 couples this year to begin praying the Our Father together. Of those 30, 23 began the practice. Of those 23, 18 reported significant improvement in their marriages within 6 months." Father Diego's notes were preserved in the Carmelite archives in Salamanca and were published in 1923 in a collection titled The Spiritual Legacy of Carmelite Reform. But Teresa's vision was not just for Catholics. It was not just for devout couples, it was for anyone willing to kneel together and pray. She insisted on this point. She wrote, "Even if a husband and wife are cold in their faith, even if they are lukewarm, even if they barely believe, if they will simply kneel together and pray the Our Father, God will honor that act. He will send His grace. He will not turn away." She based this on another vision she had in 1577. She saw a couple who rarely attended Mass and who lived carelessly, indifferent to spiritual matters. But one night, for reasons they could not explain, they knelt together and prayed the Our Father. Teresa saw an angel descend to them just as she had seen before. The cord was placed around them, and though their faith was weak and their hearts were distracted, the cord held. It was thin, barely visible, but it was there. She wrote, "God does not wait for us to be perfect before He binds us to Himself. He binds us first, and then He makes us perfect through that binding." That vision changed how Teresa spoke about marriage. Before that, she had sometimes written as if married life was a second-tier vocation, less holy than religious life. But after seeing what happened when a husband and wife prayed together, she began to speak of marriage as a path to sanctity, just as powerful as the cloister. She wrote, "A husband and wife who pray together every day are closer to God than a monk who prays alone without charity. For in their united prayer, they practice the greatest commandment, which is love." That sentence appeared in a letter to a married nobleman in Madrid in 1578. The nobleman had asked Teresa whether he should leave his wife and enter a monastery. Teresa told him no. She told him to stay with his wife and pray with her every night. She told him that if he did that faithfully, he would become a saint without ever leaving his home. The nobleman took her advice. His name was Don Fernando de Toledo. He and his wife, Dona Maria, began praying together every night in 1578. They continued for the next 20 years, until Don Fernando died in 1598. Dona Maria lived another 12 years and continued praying the Our Father every night alone, asking God to reunite her with her husband in heaven. Their story was recorded by their grandson, who became a Jesuit priest. He wrote a short biography of his grandparents in 1632, which was preserved in the Jesuit archives in Madrid and published in 1967. Teresa's vision also influenced the development of Catholic marriage preparation. By the 1800s, priests in Spain and Latin America were teaching engaged couples about the importance of united prayer before they even got married. They told them about Teresa's vision. They told them that the cord of grace was waiting to be placed around them, but only if they committed to praying together. In Mexico, a Carmelite priest named Father Juan de Santa Maria developed a marriage preparation course in 1842 that required engaged couples to pray the Our Father together every day for 3 months before their wedding. If they could not do that, he refused to marry them. His reasoning was simple. If a couple could not pray together for 3 months while they were still in love and excited to be married, they would never pray together when life got hard. And if they never prayed together, their marriage would be built on sand. Father Juan's course became popular. By 1860, over 200 couples had completed it. Of those 200, Father Juan reported that only 5 separated or lived in discord. The rest remained together, and many of them credited the habit of united prayer for saving their marriages during difficult times. Father Juan's records were preserved in the Carmelite archives in Mexico City and were studied by researchers from the Pontifical University of Mexico in 1998. The practice spread to South America. In Chile, a Carmelite missionary named Sister Beatriz del Carmen taught Teresa's vision to indigenous couples in the mountains near Santiago in 1875. She translated the Our Father into their native Mapuche language and instructed them to pray it together every evening after the sunset. The results stunned the local bishop. Within 2 years, over 60 Mapuche couples had adopted the practice. The missionary recorded that domestic violence, which had been endemic in the region, dropped by more than half. Alcoholism declined. Children were better cared for. The couples themselves reported feeling a peace they had never known before. Sister Beatrice wrote a detailed report to her superior in 1877. She wrote, "I have seen Saint Teresa's promise fulfilled before my eyes. These couples have nothing. They live in poverty that would break most Europeans, but they have the cord, and it holds them together when everything else falls apart." That report was preserved in the Carmelite archives in Santiago and was published in a Chilean Catholic history journal in 2006. The simplicity of the practice was part of its power. It required no special training, no theological education, no mystical gifts, just 2 people, 1 prayer, 1 minute. Teresa understood this. She wrote, "I have seen great scholars lose their way because they made prayer complicated. But a simple man and his wife, kneeling together to say the words Christ himself taught us, they cannot go wrong. The prayer is a shield. It protects them from their own confusion." That observation appeared in a letter she wrote to a theology professor at the University of Salamanca in 1579. The professor had asked her how uneducated lay people could grow in holiness without understanding complex doctrine. Teresa's answer was blunt. Let them pray together. That is all they need. The letter scandalized some theologians who thought Teresa was undermining the importance of doctrinal formation. But Teresa did not back down. She wrote a follow-up letter 2 weeks later saying, "Christ did not give us the Our Father so that only scholars could pray it. He gave it to fishermen, to tax collectors, to women, to children. And he gave it to married couples so that they could stand before the Father together as one." Both letters were preserved in the archives of the University of Salamanca and were published in 1971. Teresa's emphasis on simplicity made the practice accessible across all social classes. In Spain, during the late 1500s, society was rigidly stratified. Nobles, merchants, artisans, and peasants lived in separate worlds, but the Our Father belonged to everyone. A duchess could kneel beside her husband in a palace and pray the same words that a peasant couple prayed in a dirt floor hut. The cord that descended from heaven did not distinguish between rich and poor. It only distinguished between those who prayed together and those who did not. This equality disturbed some people. A Spanish nobleman wrote to Teresa in 1580, complaining that her teaching reduced the spiritual life to something common and vulgar. He argued that people of rank should have access to higher forms of prayer. Teresa's response was withering. She wrote, "You are right that people of rank should have access to higher forms of prayer, but they should start where Christ started, which is the Our Father. And if praying with your wife seems common to you, then you do not understand what Christ meant when he said, 'The 2 shall become one flesh.'" That letter is held in the National Library of Spain in Madrid, catalog number MSS/11043. The practice also faced resistance from an unexpected source: women. In the 1600s, many devout Catholic women had been taught that their spiritual life should be private and interior. They prayed alone. They kept journals. They cultivated silence. The idea of praying out loud with their husbands felt awkward, even improper. It violated the sense of separation between the domestic sphere and the spiritual sphere. A Carmelite prioress in France, writing in 1652, noted this resistance in her diary. She wrote, "I have spoken to many married women about Saint Teresa's vision. They nod and smile, but I sense their discomfort. They tell me that prayer is too personal to share with their husbands. They say their husbands would not understand. They say it would feel forced." The prioress, whose name was Mother Anne of Jesus, decided to test this resistance. She organized a retreat for married women in Paris in 1654 and required each woman to bring her husband. Over 3 days, she taught them about Teresa's vision and had them practice praying the Our Father together in front of the group. The first day was painful. The couples were stiff and embarrassed. The wives whispered, the husbands mumbled. Several couples left early, but by the 3rd day, something shifted. The couples prayed with more confidence. The wives stopped whispering. The husbands stopped mumbling. When the retreat ended, 12 couples committed to praying together every night. Mother Anne tracked those couples over the next 5 years. She wrote to them regularly and visited them when she could. In 1659, she wrote a summary of her findings. Of the 12 couples, 10 were still praying together. Of those 10, 9 reported that their marriages had improved significantly. Mother Anne's notes were preserved in the Carmelite archives in Paris and were studied by historians at the Sorbonne in 1993. But the most detailed account of resistance came from Teresa herself. In 1579, she visited a wealthy couple in Madrid who had heard about her vision and wanted her guidance. The husband, Don Luis de Mendoza, was a court official. The wife, Dona Isabel, was a patron of the arts. They received Teresa in their grand home and served her an elaborate dinner. Then they asked her to explain the vision. Teresa did, and they listened attentively. When she finished, Don Luis said, "This is beautiful. We will begin tonight." Teresa left the next morning confident that they would follow through. But 2 years later, she heard that the couple had never prayed together, not once. She wrote to Dona Isabel in 1581, asking why. Dona Isabel's response was honest. She wrote, "We are too busy. My husband works late every night. I have social obligations. By the time we are both in our bedroom, we are too exhausted to do anything but sleep." Teresa wrote back immediately. Her letter was short and direct. "You are not too busy. You are too proud. You think that prayer is something you do when you have time, when you are rested, when you feel inspired. But prayer is an act of will, not an act of feeling. If you wait until you feel like praying, you will never pray." She added, "Your exhaustion is not an obstacle to united prayer. It is the reason for it. When you are exhausted, you need God's grace more than ever. And the grace that comes from praying together will give you the strength to face another day." Dona Isabel never replied to that letter. Teresa noted in her journal that she had lost that battle. But years later, after Teresa's death, Dona Isabel sent a letter to the Carmelite convent in Ávila. The letter arrived in 1588. In it, Dona Isabel confessed that she had ignored Teresa's advice for years. She and her husband had lived parallel lives, growing more distant with each passing year. Then in 1586, Don Luis fell seriously ill. The doctor said he had only weeks to live. Dona Isabel panicked. She realized that she was about to lose her husband, and they had barely spoken to each other in years. On impulse, she knelt beside his bed and asked if they could pray the Our Father together. Don Luis agreed. They prayed once that night, and then again the next night, and the night after that. Don Luis did not die in weeks. He lived for 2 more years. And during those 2 years, Dona Isabel wrote, they prayed together every single night. She wrote, "I finally understood what Saint Teresa had been trying to tell me. The prayer was not about having time, it was about making time. And the moment we made time, everything changed." Don Luis died in 1588. Dona Isabel continued praying the Our Father every night alone, as if her husband were still kneeling beside her. She did that for the next 12 years until her own death in 1600. Her letter is preserved in the Carmelite archives in Ávila, catalogued under correspondence, received 1588. In England, during the Second World War, a Catholic chaplain named Father Thomas Merton, not to be confused with the famous Trappist monk of the same name, taught Teresa's vision to soldiers and their wives. He had been assigned to a military base near London in 1942. The war had separated thousands of couples. Husbands were deployed overseas. Wives stayed home raising children alone, working in factories, living under constant threat of German bombs. Father Merton told these couples about Teresa's vision. He told them that even if they were separated by thousands of miles, they could still pray the Our Father together. He instructed them to choose a specific time each day, convert it to their spouse's time zone, and pray at that exact moment. He called it synchronized prayer. He told them that even though they could not kneel side by side, the cord would still connect them because they were praying the same words at the same time with the same intention. Over 400 couples committed to the practice. Father Merton collected their letters and testimonies throughout the war. Many couples reported feeling a mysterious sense of peace at the appointed hour, as if their spouse were somehow present with them. One wife, Emily Harrington, wrote to Father Merton in 1943. Her husband, Lieutenant James Harrington, had been deployed to North Africa. She prayed the Our Father every day at 6 in the morning, which was 8 in the morning in Tunisia. She wrote, "I do not know how to explain this, Father, but when I pray at that hour, I feel James praying with me. I do not hear his voice, but I sense his presence. It gives me the strength to face another day of uncertainty." Lieutenant Harrington survived the war. When he returned home in 1945, he told Emily that he had prayed at 8 every morning without fail, even when his unit was under fire. He said that praying the Our Father in the middle of a battle gave him a clarity he could not explain. Father Merton's collection of letters was donated to the Imperial War Museum in London in 1968. Researchers have used them to study the role of faith in sustaining morale during wartime. The synchronized prayer technique spread beyond military couples, reaching immigrant workers and families separated by economic necessity. But Teresa's vision was not just about maintaining marriages across distance. It was about transforming them from within, creating a foundation that could withstand any pressure. In her final months, as her body failed and her strength ebbed, Teresa became almost frantic in her efforts to spread the message. She dictated letters to priests, to nuns, to married couples, urging them to teach united prayer as if the salvation of the world depended on it. In one letter written in August 1582, 2 months before her death, she wrote, "I am dying, and I will soon stand before the throne of God. But I leave behind this message for all married couples. Do not waste the gift. Do not let the cord fall unused. Pray together every night, even if it is only for 1 minute. That 1 minute will save your marriage, save your children, and save your soul." The letter was addressed to a married couple in Seville. It is preserved in the Carmelite archives, catalog number LC/1582/47. Teresa died on October 4th, 1582, in Alba de Tormes, a small town in central Spain. She was 67 years old. Her last words, according to witnesses, were, "Lord, I am a daughter of the Church." But among her final written words, found in her journal after her death, was a single line about the vision. It was dated September 28th, 1582, 6 days before she died. She wrote, "I have seen the cord placed around thousands of couples. I have seen it hold when everything else broke. I have seen it lift souls from despair into joy. If I have done nothing else in this life, I have shown them the cord. But the most striking testimony about Teresa's vision came in the 20th century. In 1948, a Polish couple named Jan and Zofia Kowalski began praying the Our Father together every night. After hearing about Teresa's vision from a Carmelite priest in Krakow, Jan was a factory worker. Zofia was a school teacher. They had been married for 5 years and had 2 small children. Their life was ordinary. They were not mystics. They were not visionaries. They were just 2 people trying to survive in post-war Poland, where poverty and political oppression were crushing the spirit of the nation. But they prayed together every night. They did it in their small apartment, kneeling beside their bed, while their children slept in the next room. They did it when they were tired. They did it when they were angry at each other. They did it when they had nothing to say to God except, 'Help us.' In 1951, John was arrested by the communist government for attending an underground Catholic meeting. He was sentenced to 3 years in a labor camp. Zofia was left alone with 2 children, no income and no idea if her husband would survive. She continued praying the Our Father every night. Alone now, but still praying, as if John were kneeling beside her. She imagined the cord still connecting them, stretching across the miles from her apartment in Krakow to the labor camp near the Soviet border. Jan survived. He was released in 1954, broken in body but not in spirit. The first thing he did when he came home was kneel beside his wife and pray the Our Father together. They continued praying together every night for the next 40 years. John died in 1993. Zofia died in 1997. At their funeral, their children testified that in all those years they never once saw their parents go to bed without praying together. Their story was recorded by a Carmelite historian in Krakow, who interviewed the children in 2002. The interview was published in a Polish Catholic journal called Carmel Today in 2004. Teresa saw all of this, not literally, of course. She died in 1582, centuries before these couples were born. But she saw the principle. She saw the power. She saw what happens when a husband and wife stand together before God and speak with one voice. And she saw what the church would lose if it ever stopped teaching married couples to pray together. In her final years, Teresa became almost obsessed with this message. She wrote letters to priests, to bishops, to married couples, urging them to practice united prayer. She called it the secret weapon of Christian marriage. She wrote, "If every married couple in Spain prayed the Our Father together every night, the devil would flee from this land within a year. He cannot stand the sight of that cord. It blinds him. It burns him. It reminds him of what he lost when he fell from heaven, which was unity with God." That letter was written in 1581 to a bishop in Toledo. The bishop kept the letter and showed it to other bishops. By the early 1600s, several dioceses in Spain had begun promoting united prayer among married couples as part of their pastoral strategy. But Teresa also saw the resistance. She saw that most couples would hear about this practice, nod in agreement, and then do nothing. She saw that the simplicity of the act would make people dismiss it as too easy, too obvious, too small to matter. She wrote, "The greatest graces often come through the smallest acts. The Our Father takes less than 1 minute to pray, but that 1 minute prayed together every night is more powerful than 10 rosaries prayed alone." She was not exaggerating. She was reporting what she had seen. In one final vision, recorded in her journal in the summer of 1582, just months before she died, Teresa saw a massive golden book in heaven. The book was open, and an angel was writing in it with a pen that glowed like fire. She asked the angel what he was writing. The angel said, "I am recording every prayer that a husband and wife have ever prayed together on earth." Teresa asked, "Why are you writing them in gold?" The angel answered, "Because these prayers are the foundation of the kingdom. When a husband and wife pray together, they build a house that hell cannot destroy. And when enough houses are built, the kingdom of God will cover the earth." Teresa saw that the book was enormous. Page after page after page of golden writing. Names of couples she had never heard of. Prayers in languages she did not recognize, spanning centuries past and centuries yet to come. She understood that what she had seen was not just for her generation, it was for all generations. It was a gift from God to married couples everywhere, a simple tool of extraordinary power, hidden in plain sight. That vision was never published during Teresa's lifetime. It appeared only in her private journal, which was kept in the Carmelite archives in Ávila after her death. The journal was not made public until 1940. when the Vatican authorized its publication as part of the process, leading to Teresa's declaration as a Doctor of the Church. In 1970, Pope Paul VI officially declared Teresa a Doctor of the Church, the first woman to receive that title. Among the reasons cited was her profound insight into the spiritual life of married couples, particularly her teaching on the power of united prayer. Today, Teresa's vision is taught in marriage preparation courses around the world, but most couples who hear about it still do not practice it. They find excuses. They forget. They fall asleep before praying. They let the habit die after a few weeks. And Teresa saw that too. She saw that the cord would be offered to millions of couples and most of them would let it fall to the ground unused. But she also saw the ones who would pick it up, the ones who would kneel together night after night, year after year, through sickness and health, through poverty and wealth, through joy and sorrow, until death separated them. And she saw that those couples would shine in heaven like stars, not because they were perfect, but because they had learned the secret. They had learned that two voices, united in prayer, carry the weight of eternity. The record sits in the Carmelite Archive in Ávila, shelf code TC47/93. Box 12, journal entry dated July 9th, 1582, 6 lines from the bottom, written in Teresa's own hand 3 months before her death. The ink is faded, the page is torn at the corner, but the words are still legible. When they pray together, God bends low to listen.